What's up, digital world? It is your special connect here, Justin. I'm connecting to you today to share something very personal to me, but I think it's really important to share this with everyone, especially if we're talking about grief. So I did start a Grief Connect in the hopes that I would be able to connect to other people who really need help and support hearing other people's stories and figuring out ways to get through their grief. Now, there's no other way for you to really know where I'm coming from with how far I've gotten, actually, if you don't know my grief story. So I want to share with you, especially on a day like today where we will be approaching the anniversary of my sister's passing. It will be, at this time, 17 years already that she has passed away, but I really want to focus more on the actual grief event, so you have a glimpse into my world and see where I'm coming from. So it started in my junior year of college. I was going to school. I was pre-med, I was pre-law, I was very active. I was an RA on campus. I had a beautiful girlfriend at the time who was really smart, and she was in this advanced medical program at the school, and it was really encouraging for me at the time because I did enjoy having a good time when I was in college and just enjoying my youth, which I'm still glad I did because I was still successful with it. But at the time, I was at her apartment. She actually didn't have an apartment, I'm sorry. I was at her townhouse, and we were all studying for finals. It was December. It was like early December. And I got a phone call from my mom. And on the phone was my dad also. And I knew that that was pretty unusual because my father doesn't like being on the phone, just like I don't really like being on the phone. And they told me, Justin, we have some news for you that we really didn't want to share with you right now because you're studying for your finals, but your sister wanted us to tell you. And what shortly after followed was that my sister was diagnosed with leukemia, and she had ALL, which was a form of leukemia, a form of childhood leukemia, and that the prognosis was good, and that a lot of kids at the time she was diagnosed have a successful survival rate. So I think 80% at the time, and that to not worry, that she's going to be strong and everything is going to be fine, as every great parent will tell their child. So I, of course, wanted to talk to my sister. My sister was actually eavesdropping on the phone, as my mom and dad told them, most likely to make sure that they told me. And, I spoke to her, and she was super strong, as she really always was. And this is not me fantasizing her in a past life. She really was always strong, very strong-minded, ran in the family. And, she said she's going to get through it. She was going to get some home tutoring at school, from school, but that she was going to make it out all right, and she was going to come back better than ever. She was 15 years old when she got the diagnosis. So that, of course, didn't really hit me so strongly because it just was kind of, not real because I didn't see my sister or my family. I did go back, I think a couple of days later, because I only had about 1 or 2 more finals left after I heard the news. But yeah, it was really interesting. Especially getting the news, because one of the functions I had on campus, I was really active. I was the external assistant director for the Up Till Dawn St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital fundraiser event that was on campus. It was an organization that we would promote doing these letter writing events up till dawn, up all night and morning, and donate and be able to fundraise money for St. Jude's Hospital. A really amazing cause that I still fundraise for till this day. And so what was really weird is that I used to be the one who had to speak to other organizations to try to get money for our cause, for our events on campus. And I would always say, you never know when it could be you. And that was me actually talking out of my own lens at that time, because my grandfather passed away, we believe, from cancer, but he was a very strong individual who didn't really want to go to the doctors towards a time where we thought he might have been sick, so we're not 100% sure, or I'm at least not 100% sure why he passed. But other than that, I didn't really have anybody that I've lost in my life. So that was my spiel across campus. And then a month to 2 months after even really starting doing the promotions at campus, this was my reality, So I finished the semester and I came back to my house in Long Island, and I spent a lot of time with my sister as much as I could, which I say in hindsight. I was 21 at the time, just turned 21, a fresh 21. I was with my girlfriend, like I said, for a couple of years at that time, and we were going through some difficult times as a couple, and this big looming event she had going on the weekend where I wasn't going to be involved in was coming up. And that event was the weekend my sister went into the hospital. So before that, I would go with my sister to her chemo sessions. I would sit and watch this girl get spinal taps. Just again, 100% trooper. I would hear stories from my mom and my dad, who would always brag that the home tutor would always talk about what a genius she really was, and how she would be finishing all this college work, going through all this chemo, and she was ahead of everything she needed to do. And she was getting frail. I would help her up the stairs. I would help her if she would fall down a little bit. She was starting to lose her hair. But it was something that we expected. She was in really good spirits about it, for as good of spirits you could be when you are going through chemotherapy. And she was really strong. And as I mentioned before, there was this looming weekend where my whole life changed incredibly. And that was really when, the night before, I met up with my girlfriend before she went on her trip. And I really felt like I needed to, because it was kind of a make or break weekend for us. Or in my mind it was. And my sister was just home, actually, from her last chemo session. So in my mind I was feeling great. She finished chemo. She was cured of leukemia at the time, that day. And we were relieved. It's when you hear that somebody in your family has cancer, and then to hear that they don't have it, it's like a weight lifted off your shoulders. Interesting though, at my age and time, I never really took the severity of life, if I'm being completely real with you. So at that time it was still a weight lifted off my shoulders, but not as much as it probably would have been now, what it would have meant to me now. So with that being said, just because she was cured, she also had no white blood cells left. She was really at this stage of recovery where it was really critical, where she needed to recuperate all her white blood cells so she can fight infections again, and she could be back to being cancer-free and a 15-year-old girl enjoying her life. And again, so back to that night before I go to meet up with my girlfriend, I'll never forget, which is still like a tearjerker to me. My sister asked me to help her with this collage book, and it was a book about her struggle through cancer and how she came about it. And at the time I said I was going to love to work with her on it. I was going to work with it on her the whole weekend. I was going to spend time with her that weekend, especially because my girlfriend wasn't going to be around. And she was cool with that. And I went off and I was out that night, and I came home, and my family was sleeping, and the next morning I was woken up incredibly early. I don't really remember the time. It might have been 5 in the morning. And my father was pretty frantic. My father's a very cool, collected guy for the most part, so to see him really stressed when he came into my bedroom, I didn't even really understand, and he was like, you gotta help, we gotta go to the hospital, your sister has to go to the hospital. Now, to take a little quick step back, because part of telling you this story is actually to record this memory for myself so that I can always remember this story and how important it was to my life, wherever part I get to in my life. But I remember my dad was really concerned the night before when I was supposed to go out with my girlfriend. And he was concerned because she was throwing up. And she was throwing up like this pinkish stuff, but we were giving her pink applesauce. Like this pink, I don't know if it was like raspberry flavored. So, and she was also going through chemo where it's very common to throw up. And, my father was kind of like, what do you think? Like, do you think we should take her to the hospital? And I was like, no, my sister was actually begging. She didn't want to go. And at that time, how do you blame a 15-year-old girl who's been getting needles in her spine and going through having these harsh chemicals in her body? And, I kind of said that I think it's just that she's sick, and, if you need anything, you let me know. I think we eventually at that time just started having cell phones. I'm so old. So that was that, and fast forward back to where I left off. I came home the next morning. My father was frantic, and he was like, and not frantic, I don't want to paint that picture. He was concerned, and he said, we have to get up, we have to go. And I remember this day, just like thinking, stupid, like 21-year-old, I was like, do I need to go? And my father gave me this look like I had never seen actually out of him before, and I've seen a lot of looks out of my father. And I just got up and I helped take my sister into the car. And what was so fascinating was that I was talking to her to keep her awake because she was really, really out of it. And I had asked her all the sports scores. Now, there'll be another video where I actually share with you my story about my sister so you can really appreciate how amazing and beautiful of a human soul she was. But she was also a big basketball fanatic like I am. And she told me, like, verbatim all the scores and who scored what. Jason Williams was like a big, big crush of hers at the time in basketball, and his team played. So she was with very soft voice, but she was telling me basketball scores in the back seat of the car as my father is driving as fast as he can to get to a hospital. And I guess a lucky moment, if we talk luck in all of this, was I was able to tell her, like, I loved her, and she told me she loved me before she went. And they put her in a wheelchair, and they rushed her off into the emergency room. And that was the first time it kind of felt real. The first emergency room doctor, God bless her, saved her at that moment. She was actually in sepsis, which is basically when your body organs start to shut down, when you have an infection in your body. And that was going on behind the scenes. I wasn't necessarily witness to a lot of what was happening behind closed doors when the doctors were with her. But we got to a point that day where she was able to get out of the emergency room, and she was in critical care. And it was kind of crazy. I mean, my parents were kind of alluding to the fact that, like, she might not make it. And, oh God, in my head, I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't imagine that that was going to be the outcome. And I remember I was like kind of walking around like a zombie at first. I have a really large family. As Special Connects develop, I'm sure you will get to know that, and you'll see a lot of them. And I'm incredibly blessed to have such a big and wonderful, loving family who are very supportive. And as soon as word got out that my sister was sick, we had a ton of people at the hospital My father alone is one of 14, and like I said, they have their kids and their kids' kids. It was a lot of people at a hospital, and this was on the weekend. And again, I was just kind of in a daze. We would get check-ins every now and then that my sister would be having a heart attack and that they revived her. I believe she had actually like 3 or 4 heart attacks that she survived before she passed. And it was just a waiting game. We were getting news from the doctors that it may not, if she was to get out of it, it would be a totally different game. She would maybe lose some like of her fingers, I think, at the time. It was just not a pretty picture, but in my head, I was a stupid 21-year-old kid who was like, she's at the hospital, she's going to be fixed, and as long as she's alive, greedily enough. But any case, as I was going on, I kind of gave you the story about the girl I was dating at the time, and again, in hindsight, this was a coincidence. It was nothing on her end at that time. She was just going on a trip with her friends, but we were just at a bad place, and I didn't hear from her. So that was just on top of it, just like everything was going wrong. And seeing my parents vulnerable for the first time, for a kid, is like really crazy when you have really strong parents. So it was a lot, but I was really hopeful. I actually remember that I kept my fingers crossed from as soon as I was in the hospital until the day they gave me news that she passed away. So we were getting news back and forth that my sister was going up and down. It was really hard to go in and check her out because she was constantly needing attention, and there was just becoming more and more people coming to the hospital. It was really becoming a little overwhelming, and we got to a point where we were there for about 2 days straight, and at one point the doctors were like, this is going to be a long process, so it's really important that you go home and get a little bit of rest before you come back so you could be strong for if she gets better. And I was really, really reluctant. I did not want to leave that hospital for anything. I mean, I was already planning on which kidney I was going to give or what organ needed to be given to like help my sister at the time, and like even just to leave the hospital was crazy to ask for, but my mom made me basically do it. And my father, I believe, stayed in the hospital, and me and my mom went back to the house. It was pretty late at night. We really actually didn't sleep at the house. We just went back to take like a quick shower, get dressed again, and then go back to the hospital. And we went back, and that night the hospital was really kind enough to allow my mom and my dad and myself to sleep in one of the rooms that was next to my sister's room. And as we got back to the hospital, I don't even think it was more than like an hour after getting back, my sister, there was a code coming from my sister's room, and it's like I'll never forget seeing all these doctors rush into her room, and they draw the curtain, and I'm semi-curious what's happening, and I also kind of don't want to know what's going on. The office had this round kind of nurse's desk, and there was rooms in a round fashion, so I was directly across from her room on the other side of the circle. And I just remember praying so hard and thinking like, all right, this is just another heart attack that they're going to get her out of. And yeah, they kind of rushed us into another room. This was like a room, not the room that we were sleeping in, a room that we were staying in for a lot of the weekend, waiting to hear what was going on with my sister. And you can never forget the moment you hear somebody you love so much is gone. And it was this doctor who was this female, maybe 40s to 50s, maybe even early 60s, short black hair, had an accent, very sweet voice, but came into the room and basically told us the news that my sister didn't make it. And I explain it to people who ask all the time. I think when I closed my eyes, I saw darkness, and then I just saw a white tick, like a tally, and it was like I was reborn. And that sounds maybe strange, and I don't really care if it does, because this is my grief story, not yours. But I felt like I was like a whole new person. It didn't really make sense, my parents were upset. Obviously, we were all upset, but they gave us medications to try to calm us, which I don't even know if it worked or not. I was so numb, like so numb. My cousins and two of my aunts and uncles and some cousins were actually at the hospital at like that time. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning when my sister passed, and came home with us, took us back home to our house. And before that, they asked if we wanted to say our final goodbyes. And I reluctantly did, because they warned us before we went in how her face and how she would have looked. If there's one thing I could forget about the story, would be how she looked. But that's also something that you can't. It's something that you can't shake out of your head. And I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it was really, it was not my sister. And we said our goodbyes. What else would you say? What else do you do? How long do you sit and linger for? And that was it. I started a new life then. And like I said, my cousins and my aunt and my uncles, they helped take my parents back to the house. And my cousins, who were like my sisters, they were always like my sisters, even before my sister, because there was like a 5.5-year age difference between me and my sister. But they came and they slept at the house. And something that my cousin talks to me about every now and then, and something I don't forget about either, is just the scream of your like the scream of your mother. Just the absolute pain is just, I never ever thought I even was that deep. It's funny, I laugh at my superficial, stupid 21-year-old self. It was just so deep. I remember the pain I felt, and I tried to explain it to the doctor at the time, was my nerves were all scratching like nails on a chalkboard. But it was not, I don't even, still obviously can't explain it really that well. But that moment and then that night was just something I don't think I'll ever forget. But this is why I actually did this video, to make sure I didn't forget. And that is why I'm sharing this story with you. So I am going to share other stories. There will be more to this connection because for sure, although you see me sad, that's a part of it, and that's always what I'll wear and I'll have, and I don't have days like this so much anymore, where I'm sitting and crying. I have a lot of happy, smiling days, and that's something I didn't think in the grief event would ever happen. I really, really did it. And again, from this point on, a lot of the videos I'm going to share with you will be connected to this event, this story that I just shared with you all. And I appreciate anyone who listened to the whole thing. It is not an easy story for me to share. It's not so easy for me to be really this vulnerable for the whole planet to see. But if it helps anybody, I really think it's all worth it. And I hope that you who has grief, because many of us in this planet walk around with grief and a story as deep as that, I hope you share your stories, because people who meet me at first have no idea. They think I'm like this chill, laid back, fun-loving kind of dude, which I am, But it comes with a lot of hard work and keeping active and staying true to myself and loving my family and my friends and finding a lot of meaning and doing meaningful things in my sister's memory. And yeah, all of that. So thanks again for listening to my story. And hopefully through time I'll be able to hear some of your stories and we can share our stories so other people who are going through grief can understand maybe what it feels like in the moments that you felt your grief and how it affects you. So thanks again for being a special connect to me, guys, and listening to my story. I really appreciate it, especially in honor of my sister's name. It means the world. Peace out.